We were nobodies. I didn't come from the beauty industry. I was a frustrated customer that wanted to solve a problem first for myself and then be able to offer that to everybody else.
On today's episode of eCommentary, we are joined by Sid Baveja, CEO of Humanery, ex-Just Eat, investor, former banking analyst, and a super smart businessman. I came across Sid when he had posted on LinkedIn a somewhat cry for help, looking for people not to invest in his business, but to support his business during a time where they were struggling to raise investment. And I was really sad to see that, unfortunately, this story didn't have the happy ending we would all hope for. So Sid was super generous to come on and share his story about how he got to where he got to with Humanery and how he's going to bounce back even stronger than ever. Sid, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me on your show, Andy, and such a generous and kind introduction. I really appreciate that.
And thank you. I know that it's quite raw, what you're going through. And where I'd love to start is your journey up to that point with Humanery. Take me through the good times, the more challenging times, and what brought you to that point of making that LinkedIn post.
So just for context for those that are listening and watching, the LinkedIn post was, as Andy said, a cry for help. So just some context. We had been trying for a few months leading up to that post in somewhat mid-June to try and raise money to continue growing Humanery.com, which is a destination where we were aggregating the finest brands in the men's grooming and men's wellness space to try and deliver a safe, educational, and convenient place for men to go and buy products for themselves, for their grooming routines, their well-being and wellness routines. And we'd run into lots and lots of challenges in trying to raise money. A few of those challenges were, one, the market generally has tightened up more recently as interest rates have gone up and commodity prices have shot through the roof. And there have also been a string of very public failures recently in the media that are of very large scale. Look, think about Silicon Valley Bank that recently failed. There are some other very large, what we used to celebrate as unicorns and decacorns that have basically imploded. And generally speaking, the market valuations have come down significantly. In many cases, I think personally, a better reflection of the honest and true performance of businesses that I think were overhyped and overblown for a while. But there's not one person or one institution one can blame for that. It was just the sign of times. Money was free and money is no longer free. So things have gotten more challenging. So the issue that we had faced with Humanery trying to raise money was we had never built ourselves with the kind of ethos of grow top line at all costs, like some of the previous e-commerce plays had been built. Again, because they had raised a significant amount of money and that's what was expected. You use the money, you build top line, you show an insane growth trajectory, and that's what investors buy into. When I started Humanery in late 2021, after a 5-year stint at Just Eat, I raised in relative terms, a very small amount of capital, about £300,000, mostly from friends, family, and a fund that I am a venture partner at, and I'm close to the investing team there. Thinking of this more as a experiment. I have a hypothesis that men are starved of better quality products, education on what to do for their skin, their hair, etc., that there is a strong and growing demand from the consumer, but is currently unmet by traditional beauty retail environments because they are so focused on the feminine consumer. On paper, that sounds like a pretty self-explanatory hypothesis. Anyone walking on the high street will say, look, here, you look at any beauty retail environment or anything online, it's mostly focused on a feminine consumer. But more and more men from all walks of life want to engage. They just don't have a place to go. And so it sounded reasonable enough. So we said, we don't need a lot of money to prove whether this is true or false. Let's actually just try and build that platform and do it in the most economically responsible way possible. So, for example, when we used to onboard vendors, brands that make these products that would sell on the platform, we would say to them, and we still maintained until the very end before we paused operations at Humanery, was we only want to make money when you make money. So we are a marketplace model. We're going to try and change the way that the beauty retail works, which is traditionally you become a wholesale stockist of a brand. And then actually what ends up happening when you become a wholesale stockist is your incentives don't really align with the brand that's making the product, because then you start getting into price decisions that might undercut a brand on their own website. You don't really have any incentive to share insights and data with your brand that will help them in any way, because you're trying to hold on to that data. So there's all sorts of misalignment of incentives. But also then ultimately what I think ends up happening, and that's the worst thing possible, is that the consumer loses in that when you have a wholesale stockist, they are not really incentivized to drive discovery and education. They're just incentivized to move volume. And so they chase where there's existing demand. So a lot of times what our customers at Humanery used to tell us was, I didn't know this brand existed. Where was this brand? But this is such a phenomenal product. What the hell? And even when we sent out communications to our customers saying we are shutting down, a lot of them wrote to us unprompted. They said, where am I going to get this stuff now? This is not okay. This is not fair. I want this stuff to be made available to me. And again, there are lots of challenges in the industry which prevent great small independent brands from getting a showcase. I wanted to change that. So I started an experiment. The early results were very positive, especially from the brand side, meaning the vendors that wanted to sell their products. They were really quite pleased to find a more equitable, more fair solution for them. They were much more willing to co-create content and talk about Humanery alongside their own marketing because of the way that we had set ourselves up. But ultimately, the real challenge was and is still today, I think, how do you acquire customers efficiently enough with the kind of scale you need to have a marketplace business succeed? Because a marketplace business needs a lot of volume and liquidity for it to work. This is my experience for the last 11 years. I was at Viagogo first for 5 years, then at Just Eat, both two-sided marketplace businesses. They operate on liquidity. We had very healthy unit economics. We had very healthy take rates and a very strong repeat customer base as well. But for it to be viable, you need to do it at a very large scale. And that will either take a huge amount of investment, or you have some sort of luck where you can drum up demand like that. And that's very challenging to do. There are so many things that people said to me even before we were starting. Oh, if you just worked with influencers, you'll be fine. You did some work with influencers and actually drove nothing. Oh, you just have to create content and you'll be fine. So we created content across multiple channels, and only one channel actually did anything for us, which was basically SEO on Google. Like everything else was just, it didn't drive anything. And content is so temporal in its relevance, it disappears after a while. So the only thing that sticks is the written word on Google, and that's what was really working. So I think ultimately where I landed was I said, I need support, because I cannot raise money from the traditional investment channels, the institutional investors, the VCs, the family offices, because they're all fairly afraid of the current market condition. Their risk appetite has reduced drastically. And I can't say it is unfair. It was unfair of them to not support us. I get it. This is the reality of the market, and we are a very high risk venture. And so it came down to, can we really get ourselves across the line by simply being honest and authentic and say, this is where we are? Situations changed a lot. The investment community is no longer betting on the UK consumer like they would have in the past because of the changes in the environment. And to be honest, Andy, we got a huge amount of support. I got so many messages from people that I hadn't spoken to maybe years, and I'd met them a long time ago. And they said, oh, I'm just rooting for you. Like anything I can do to help. I put down, I bought a VIP membership, anything I can do to help. I just want to see you across the line, because there's a genuine support in today's economy for small businesses to succeed, for them to at least remain operational. Sadly, we didn't get enough money in through that initiative for me to believe that we could continue trading unaided for the next 12 months, 8 months. And I didn't want to take advantage of anyone's support. And there was literally 7 days after I put that LinkedIn post out, I looked at the numbers. I was looking at the numbers constantly over and over again. But then on that seventh day, is a day of reckoning. Are we actually going to make it? Or are we going to have severe problems? And I don't have the personality to fake it till I make it. I just don't operate like that. I really struggle with that. I have trouble sleeping at night if I'm faking things. And we just had to then make a call and say, it's not going to happen. Maybe it wasn't the right time. There were many things that were going right which I wouldn't change now that I'm thinking about all this stuff. Many things I would change as well, but that's how it transpired. I felt very much compelled to talk about this openly because it was the only way to gather enough support and proof that we were doing something right. And then that gave me the confidence, honestly, to end things in the right way too. Never felt, oh my God, I was just chasing a dumb idea. No, I actually got incredible amount of support. And that gave me the confidence and the team the confidence to say, oh, actually, you know what? We got to stop for now. We weren't doing something wrong. It just, there are many other things that were happening that were outside of our control. And perhaps in the future, never say never, as they say, there will be a chance for Humanery to come back. We don't know.
I think that that's so refreshing to hear. And you and I had a chat before we started recording about when a business doesn't make it, there's this stigma attached to the business that the either the product was a crappy product, or the team didn't work hard enough, or there was poor decisions made, when actually you can just be unlucky.
Yeah.
That your concept is built on volume and data. For a marketplace to be successful, you need to have volume, to have the data, to make the optimizations, to make
Yeah.
it all run smoothly, and then also to have the runway for the customer acquisition efforts to pay dividends
Mm.
long term. But that takes heck of a lot of cash
It
to
does. It does.
do.
Yeah. Mm.
And in the current climate, accessing that cash is super difficult. It's it the days where you can go to a fund and raise based on some attractive Shopify dashboards are gone, because the
Yeah.
VCs have been burnt by this.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've
They have.
been
Yeah. Mm.
they've been burnt quite heavily. But I think one of the things that I really respected was the candidness in your cry for help, in that you actively outlined the protocol for what would happen if this process was unsuccessful. So that if people supported and you couldn't get it over the line, you were very clear that you would make sure that they were looked after. And I just thought it says a lot about you and about Humanery as a brand, that and the way that you were doing things, that you would even make that offer. Because some people would post that, take all the cash they could, be like, yep, we didn't make it. Really sorry. You've got your product, which is stock that's lying around, ship it out. And then that's the end of the story. And you've maybe took a little bit away from it. So I thought it was really beautiful that you were so honorable
Mm.
in the way that you were doing things.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Andy. I think someone said to me recently, as a brilliant individual said, people remember how you start and how you finish. And it was also crucial to finish on the right note and do things right. Now, don't get me, to be honest, there are a few upset people as well as a result of us not being able to make it, especially some vendor brands that joined us more recently, up until the point where it was so blatantly clear that we wouldn't make it. And some of them were hoping and banking on the fact that this would be a channel for them to grow their sales. But for the most part, then we said, look, we had looked at the numbers where we could refund them for anything that we owed to them. Same thing with all the people that bought the VIP memberships. We gave all the money back late last week. We said, look, this is now in today's world, if you want to succeed in business, my personal opinion, it's better to be honest and transparent, because that's what builds your reputation and that's what builds loyalty. And I think also the best investors are looking for business leaders and builders who are truly understanding of the long-term implications and not just into this short-termism, because that's actually what's burned so many people in the past and is making these very irresponsible short-term decisions. And again, I have to be honest, it is incredibly hard in the moment to put yourself in that place. I went through some insane emotions after putting that post out, because leading up to putting that post out as well, it took a lot of thought and thinking, not just on my part, but collectively with my small team that I had been able to build, to be able to say, hey, we have to be honest with ourselves. Otherwise, we'll do things wrong. The honest truth is, this is a situation, we have to put it out there. It took a lot of courage for the team as well to say, yeah, that's the right thing to do. Put it out there. Because for them as well, if they were only thinking about themselves, they would have been like, no, I'd rather not be associated with this, man. Because there's stigma, a negative stigma associated with saying, hey, we might be failing. Can you help us? So that was incredibly courageous on their part as well. Honestly, there's a lot of credit given to them. They gave me a lot of strength to be able to say, to put this out. And after putting that out, it was a roller coaster of emotions. It was very draining, if I'm honest. But now that we're 2 or 3 weeks post that, I feel like it was the right thing to do, honestly. And that authenticity, that honesty, genuinely coming from the heart, I think, connects people in today's world. People, I feel like they need that. And not trying to take credit for it myself, because I just said the team was the main reason, the strength, but the pillar behind this. But I wish more people did that, because it would give so many more people the confidence and courage to go out and take that risk, because then they can be honest with failure or success and not just trying to put up a facade. This is my opinion.
Yeah, it's incredible the highlight reel life that we live through social media is only ever truly revealed when someone fails and then they come back with their success. So you always hear the second time founder story that, oh, yeah, it was so hard and we did all this wrong and we lost a lot. And sometimes that story only ever gets told when they've made
You
the
did.
success.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we don't see it. And I think a couple of things that really struck me about the post that you made. The first one was, for a brand, this was the last port of call, because
Mm.
by raising the situation, you almost close any opportunity for the majority of investment funds are going to look at that and say, it's that's it. That's the Hail Mary play that they're shooting for. You close the investment door, and maybe you have somebody who's has more of an emotive connection to the brand that will come in with investment. But it's a big step to
Mm.
make. But I think that there's people out there that will find strength in what you and the team decided to do there, because they're also going through some really challenging times, and all they're seeing in their feed is the success stories with their podcasts talking about how every decision they made was brilliant and they secured the exit and rode off into the sunset. And
Yeah.
what I would love to hear from you, Sid, is if you were to do this all over again with Humanery, what wouldn't you change? What are the things that you would absolutely repeat?
Yeah. As we were just talking about it before we started the recording the show, I've been spending so much more time thinking about what I would do differently as opposed to what I wouldn't change. So this is a breath of fresh air, just even to think about that. So the first thing that I would not change, that I think we did absolutely, was the team and the people. I have run this scenario so many times in my head. Was it something that someone did, that the team did, or they didn't do? And I really can't think of one situation that would have completely turned the ship around had we done right through someone being the vehicle of that change. It wasn't the teams. I'd absolutely hire the same team, because they shared the vision. They shared the culture of being honest and transparent, of taking true accountability and ownership in whatever they touched. Because by many standards, we built things incredibly quickly with a tiny amount of capital relative to other, in today's definition, more successful marketplaces. So I would definitely not change the team because of the people that they were, the ethos that they had, and the way they went about their business. And I think there's some proof in that, because when we said finally we have to close, the amount of support and love we got with unprompted was insane. I had never expected that level of support, where customers came and said, "This is incredibly disappointing. Where am I going to find this stuff? I can't believe that something like this doesn't get money thrown at it. Like, you have to succeed." The amount of support that we got, all only possible because of the team. So I would not change that. And my one advice to any founder today that is either struggling or is maybe even looking to start a business, the one thing that I hope and pray for you to get right is your team. That is make or break. And even though we are today talking about a failed business, the team was not a failure. The team was phenomenal. The other thing that I would not change is the empathy we had from day one for our customers and vendor brands. Another reason why I think we made it as far as we made it with a relatively small amount of capital was because we treated our customers as humans and not just as a number on a ticket. And that in itself was one of the big reasons why some very celebrated and big vendor brands joined the platform. We were nobodies. I didn't come from the beauty industry. I was a frustrated customer that wanted to solve a problem. first for myself and then be able to offer that to everybody else. So for a huge brand like Dermalogica or Augustinus Bader, some of these very celebrated premium brands in the world of skincare and personal care, to join our platform was in when I first started the business, when I made a list of it'd be amazing to have these brands, I thought it'll take 10 years before they even talk to us. And no, it happened in 18 months because they saw what we were doing for the consumer, the customer, and they wanted to be a part of that story. So we wouldn't change that at all. And I think the final thing that I would not want to change has to be the approach was from the beginning. We started by thinking about this as an experiment. Somewhere along the way, we just lost that because as the traction started to build, I got more excited about, oh God, we could do more. Like the numbers are looking really good. This isn't just a silly idea. But the approach in the very beginning was this is an experiment. And I think it allowed us to learn things that many other businesses that didn't think about it as an experiment in the beginning, as almost having I just want to learn first. I don't know if there's profit. I just need to learn first. Being able to think like that was something I wouldn't change. So I don't know if I'm going to be a second time founder. I don't know. But if I ever if I ever become a second time founder, one thing I wouldn't change would be that learning mentality, that this is an experiment. You have to prove things, you have to learn fast, as opposed to, I know all the answers. This is it. And I think that I wouldn't change. I would, again, tell most founders these problems need to be approached as an experiment. You have to let the world prove through data, through insight, through talking to customers. You don't know anything. Even if you are a domain expert for 20 years, you've been doing something, I guarantee you will be proven wrong. And many times approach it as an experiment.
Yeah. And that's something we see time and time again in what we do. We're always asked for the formula. So brands come to us because we're working with other brands and they want to tap into what we know. And they say, oh, but how does it do it? And we always say we can show you some of the strategy that they use, but you've got to understand that if you're looking to Dermalogica and their content for your marketing and you have no brand recognition whatsoever, you're playing a completely different game.
Entirely.
Things function
Absolutely.
differently.
Yes.
You have to learn your strategy. Otherwise, you're trying to build a business based on somebody else's business that is so far along the journey
Yeah.
that you end up with this product that doesn't stand out. You have no originality and you have no way of catching up because they're far better at playing their own game than you will ever be. So you've got to work out how to play your game that brings you to speed or overtakes.
Absolutely. You've actually put that into much more. You're much more eloquent than I am. You're totally right. And I think the one thing that small brands, new brands, should take solace in is that if they take the experimental approach, where they're genuinely open to learning and can get more structured at that experimentation over time, they will build insights that larger organizations will not be able to build because larger organizations are not as nimble. They are very set in their ways. And that's a disadvantage in many times. And that's why so many startups come and change in how industries work because they were open to that learning approach. I had the privilege also of meeting the global CEO of Dermalogica a few weeks ago at a conference, and we were just chatting about a few things and some insights that I gave to him. He was just like, "Oh man, I wish my team was thinking like that," because they are very set in many ways because of the size of the organization, the sort of the risks that they have to mitigate. Whereas for me, as I got nothing to lose, man, I could go to zero tomorrow. I'm almost there anyway. So like, I just keep pushing through and figuring out new ways to do things, the insight. So yeah, you're absolutely right. If any brands, I just want to copy a playbook, that's a recipe for failure, man. Like that, you're almost guaranteeing no outcome if you just copy playbooks.
That's it. And you shouldn't be afraid of the outcome.
Exactly.
When you're in growth mode, nobody cares as much as you do about your brand.
Absolutely. So right.
You launch an experiment, you can see within a couple of days that, look, this isn't working.
Yeah.
You can turn off the experiment, you can put it in the cupboard, nobody will remember it, only yourself. And when you're a Dermalogica, if you make the same mistake, the press will be on it. It's magnified because the
Yeah.
audience is so much bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I would also love to ask the obvious question, which follows on from things that you wouldn't change. If you were to outline maybe one thing to change, what would that have been? You're allowed to say timing as well.
Yeah, timing. It would have been probably one thing. This is a very complicated question. I still haven't finished my reflection. I don't know if it'll ever be complete. Still going through that process of going or rewinding everything in my head. What did we do wrong? I think timing is certainly one of them, but I genuinely feel that's probably the hardest thing to get right, almost impossible to get right. So probably not the ideal answer. One thing I would have changed that which is related to one thing I wouldn't change almost as they're almost mirrors is when in the very, very beginning, actually, I was a bit miserly in building full-time team because I didn't have much money. So I thought, oh, the larger organizations, because they're less nimble, they wouldn't have been able to tap into a pool of expertise from contractors and freelancers and building them together and trying to like weave things together. That's how I went about it in the beginning of the first 6 months, just weaving things with different contractors and freelancers who were experts in a specific lane, maybe. And 6 months in, I was like, sure, this is really complicated, man. And I'm the only person because I was a solo founder. So I didn't have a co-founder, I didn't have a big support to be able to lean on other people. For me, at the end, it became like very overwhelming 6 months in from late September, early October 2021 onwards to Jan, Feb in 2022. And I feel like I lost a lot of time as a result of trying to do things more cheaply or more flexibly. Because then after that, I had a very honest conversation with one of my investors and he said, you're being silly. Like you need to build a team. The money will come behind a team. That's how investments work. Isn't that how you've invested before? And I thought about it. Yeah, absolutely. Like whenever I've personally backed a business with my own money, it has been because the people, not because I'm a domain expert in that business or that industry. It's because I know that those people are incredibly competent and also great people, honest people that will make a business work. That's how it happens. And customers will love them. The industry will love them. And so I thought about it again. It's like, okay, I got to go back to the drawing board. That's when I started building a more full-time team. And when that full-time team was in the door, settled in, and truly, I guess it also takes some time for a team to be very functional together, right? You have to find the right elements. That's when the magic really started to happen. And in hindsight, knowing what I know, I had limited runway cash-wise. The first thing I should have done is find those missionaries who would have come together to build a mission. What I started doing is I started looking for mercenaries who were very good at one specific thing, and I was trying to weave them together. Absolutely wrong. Never will do that again. I went against my own advice. I went looking for mercenaries instead of missionaries in the beginning. And then when I flipped it on its head and I had the good fortune of being told, what are you doing? Change this. The magic actually started to happen. I was like, "God." So this is one thing I would change. So again, if I ever become a second time founder, my one and only job in the beginning will be find the team, build the team, find the missionaries. Forget everything else for now.
I couldn't agree more. And this has been one of my I'm a solo founder, so I
Mm.
set my business up. And I think one of the challenges that a solo founder faces is that you start in isolation
Mm.
and you learn a lot and you work, you put the hours in, you become an oracle of knowledge so
Yes.
that
Yeah.
you almost become limited by your own ego that, oh, I know how to do this and I can do
Mm.
this. And then you bring people in and they can do it, but you still hold the control with the
Yeah.
freelancer
Yeah.
because it's been all you're the star of the show. And what you learn very quickly is the value of bringing other people in who play a great role in your show, who help. I've learned this year, I've really developed a greater appreciation of my team. I have my second child was born in February this year, so that's
Congratulations. Yeah.
two children under two, which means that every day I have to be home from the office by 5:30.
Yeah.
We've also been dealing with we lost a family member
I'm
pretty recently,
sorry to hear that.
which is really tough
Yeah.
because you've got the element of being at home looking after family and you've got your baby or your business and having a team that you're able to say, "Hey guys, I've got to go."
Yeah.
And knowing that they can take care of everything and that the ship continues to sail smoothly. You don't get that with contractors, but not every contractor. You won't get that experience. You need these people that are rooting for you, that are rooting for the business, that are collaborative. And
100%.
once you've experienced that in business, you'll always search for that because there's a point where the ship continues to sail smoothly. You return back to work and you're so grateful for these people that have taken care of your original idea.
Yeah.
It's a really humbling experience to go through. So I
Absolutely.
love that point.
Absolutely. And I don't think we can emphasize the importance of that enough. If anyone's watching or hearing the show, coming from two solo founders who've gone through it, the one thing you should do is make yourself someone said this again very eloquently recently. Your job is not to be the copywriter or the journalist writing the article. Your job is to be the editor as a founder. So find those amazing journalists and copywriters and just get out of the way and then give them the direction. And it's very difficult to do in the beginning, really challenging. And I was fortunate also to have a senior leadership experience at a large corporation like Just Eat before. And then again, had the experience of leadership at small to growing at Viagogo. What's really frustrating for me personally is that what I knew and I had experienced in these other two companies was to be a successful leader, you have to build the team. The team is what delivers, and then you have to be the coach, the guide, and almost make yourself redundant so you can go solve another problem and the team takes over. That's almost like the informal mission. But I didn't do that in my own venture in the first 6 months. And in already difficult times, market was turning, then the goddamn Russia, Ukraine war happened. And then again, there was more pain in the world. We were just coming out of the pandemic, some glimmer of hope. And then this again happens. And then I'm like, wait, I just lost 6 months. That's a lifetime in a small startup. And so, yeah, I couldn't emphasize this more. So the main thing I've been playing again over and over in my head. Why did I start like that? When I knew from my own experience in the beginning, it's the team that's going to deliver the magic. You have to find the missionaries. But anyway, we
Yeah.
live and learn. Yeah.
Yeah. That's such a good
Hmm.
such a good point. And I just draw these similarities with our first 2 years in business where it's me, the founder, and some freelancers doing bits and pieces. And we could never get past a certain point.
Yeah.
We could never get past that point. And then once I parked that approach, started bringing people in, the, things just work. And I didn't lose 6 months. I probably lost 2 years. And now we have the team take care of things. They don't really need me too much. That's why I get to do lovely things like speak on podcasts and learn more. But I think what I would also love to get in terms of wisdom from yourself, Sid, is along the journey with Humanery, there comes a point where you start to notice. If I say red flags, you'll know what I mean in terms of there's things that start to appear that indicate that the future of the business is not going the way that you want it to go. And I think that there's a lot of content on the internet about how to scale a business that's doing well and the recipe for that. And like you said before, you get the content creators, the influencers, you get the marketing agencies to do their thing
Yeah.
with the business. But there's not much support for brands that are struggling at the moment. And there are red flags that pop up. What would your advice be to businesses that are struggling to identify whether it's something that they can overcome or whether it's something they need to start to look at either diversifying strategy or winding down the business? What are the key things to consider?
It's a great question. So the first thing that we started to notice that was a red flag was the early part of 2023. We started to get very choppy performance month over month. So some months are doing great, some months like unexplained. Like what? We just keep dropping. Like this is really ridiculous. Like why? What are we doing wrong? And that when we started to dig deep into this, why is it that certain months we don't get the same performance, the same results? We found a couple of factors that were outside of our control. And if we had tried to change that, it would have taken us months, if not longer, to be able to bring that within our control with much more investment. And we knew that getting much more investment just to solve that problem wouldn't have been possible because it wasn't like that building new IP or new technology at that point would have saved the game because there was still a lot of risk with that. So if you're in a situation where you've done the hard work of digging in, and you realize, oh my God, like this is the one problem that's really the root cause here. And it's outside my control because either I'm buying that from a third party or I've stitched something together or the trend is turned against me and whatnot. You really have to think hard about, is it worth throwing more money into the problem? Because many times it's not just about throwing more money into it. It's about having a fundamental defensibility, which you cannot always create with money. I learned that firsthand, right? Like you can't always create that with money. And that's when we tried a few different things. Some of it worked. And then the results became much more consistent. For example, our cost of acquisition was solidly coming down over a 7-8 month period. with repeat rates going up. But what we were doing was, as a result of the repeat rates going up, investing more in loyalty and repeat and being much more targeted, we had compromised on top line growth to be as fast as it could have been had we not been so strapped in trying to reduce our cost of acquisition and increase the marketing efficiency ratio. Not a bad thing, because if you were a bigger mature business, that's, absolutely would want to see that trend, because you want to get more and more profitable. But with the stage that we were at, it was like a fallacy to try and chase that too quickly. And we did that thinking that's what investors are going to love. And they just weren't impressed. They were like, whatever, I want you. You know what, Sid, I would have been impressed by if your CAC was zero. And I'm like, that's ridiculous, right? That's never going to happen. But that's where the market had turned. So I think being able to understand, and this is very difficult, this is very complicated, but being able to identify what is signal, what is noise, and looking at that signal, if the signal is, look, it's within my control to solve within a specific amount of time, then go for it, because you are by design setting up to take risk and deliver that. But if you think that is impractical within a time box period, and because there will still be other things outside your control, even if you try to solve this problem, then you really got to take a hard look and say, am I doing this right? Am I going to keep it? Like for me, I knew that I would always be chasing a working capital problem, because my investment in marketing and maintaining the platform was higher than my current volume could support. And if we couldn't solve that in 3 months, it was just not worth it, because so many things were outside our control. And I had ideas of how to do it, but then I was like, these ideas also come with many risks. And ultimately, again, even if I was able to raise money for it, if it didn't pay off, it would be chasing the same problem again. And we decided, actually, you know what, we'd rather actually pause, rethink everything. And if that still yields no result, then it's a total shutdown, but so be it. Like, we cannot keep burning people along the way as a result of that. I don't know if that
I think
answers
that's,
your question.
yeah, I think there's some really sage advice there. And one thing that we see is that there's a hope that marketing can solve business problems. Oh, if I just do this with my ad creative, it'll bring my CAC down and everything will be sunshine and roses. Or if I try the latest platform, I've heard that to get a low CAC on TikTok, so we need to do TikTok and we invest in TikTok. And the problem isn't TikTok, or it's not the CAC on Facebook. There's other issues
Yeah.
at play,
No.
and it's people will chase this and they'll throw their last coin in the well trying to get a platform to solve a business problem, when realistically they could probably look more internally and
Yep.
work out, okay, we need to do this. It's maybe not now, but it's far easier to reduce margin on a product by negotiating with 5 different suppliers as opposed to trying to negotiate a reduction in CAC on Facebook beyond a certain point.
Beyond a certain point.
It's
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's absolutely true. And if you're building a consumer business, you know that you have to be present on these platforms. You would love for it to be all organic and virtually free, but this is not the reality. This is just the odds are stacked against you. And look, I know of a celebrity brand I won't mention, backed by a huge celebrity, like global star. Even they have problems on their social media. And if they have problems with their social media and you think you have the answers by just throwing more money at the problem, my friend, please take a step back and reflect again. That's not going to be the answer. And yeah, when I came across that, actually, to be honest, one of the reasons, again, one of the big signals that came to me was, my God, this global stars team is telling me that they have tried to crack every nut to open on social media to get the answer, and they themselves are struggling. The celebrity is doing extremely well still, but their brand was still trying to understand many different things. I realized, hey, this isn't a Humanery problem only. And if they can't solve it, I have structural disadvantages with Humanery. And so I don't think that it's a me problem only. And so, yeah, it's a lot of it is just reflection of what can you really control and what time do you have left to control that?
yeah, what's your runway? And this is one of the things where people don't look at consumer confidence or consumer sentiment. If we look at the last 12 months,
Mm,
we've started to see a slight upward trajectory in consumer sentiment,
mm,
but still sitting at negative I think it's negative 39 or negative 29 in May.
Okay.
So we're so far away from being in any form of a positive outlook with consumers, so that when your brand is not selling as well as you did in 22 or 21, it's not necessarily the platform, it's that times have changed.
Yes.
People have less disposable income. It's- You're fighting now. A lot of businesses are fighting with tactics that aren't sustainable for themselves, so
Yeah.
that they're throwing heavy price promotion. They're selling product for cost or a loss to continue to keep those revenue numbers inflated in the hope that an investor will come in. And they're fighting with tactics that, unless they get those investors, it's very tough.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you've got to take into account what's happening in the world, what's happening in your business. Do you think that it's possible to turn it around? And if the answer's no, then you need to look at, okay, what do we do and how do we come out of it, which is probably one of the hardest things for a founder to do. And that leads me on to what I really wanted to wrap up with asking is, like, how are you?
Mm. Yeah, that is still an unwritten story because I'm still processing a lot of emotion, actually. To be honest, right now I feel lost. I feel almost empty because for 2 years I poured my heart, soul, every cell in my body was Humanery. And now knowing that we are not continuing that makes me feel really lost and empty. And I feel very privileged to be able to have this conversation with you because it affords me the formal opportunity to process everything. Because you asked me this great question, what would you have not changed? And as I said to you before we started the show, I had not given any time or thinking to what I would not have changed. I didn't spend any time being grateful, being in gratitude for just the amazing opportunity I had, the people that I had on the mission. I genuinely feel like that was a divine blessing because these are some incredible people. And so at the moment, I feel lost, but now I'm starting to feel also grateful. And I think this conversation has been very helpful in affording me the mind space to think in a different direction. And I keep thinking about the idea that I hope that this experience helps others genuinely, because I think we need to change the perception of what it is in today's world to be a business owner, business builder, because so much of the big growth in tech through the times when money was free and cheap and easy has really warped the calculus for how you approach building a business. There are some amazing businesses that are maybe more traditional, maybe not in as sexy a place as generative AI, that are insane businesses, that are amazing businesses, that have been built by phenomenal people, but they just don't get the limelight. And because we keep chasing the limelight, when it doesn't work out, like me, you feel empty. And that's, I think we need to rewrite that and approach it differently. I don't have the answer of how you would approach it differently, but I hope is that we'll change it. And if this experience is valuable to anyone in any way, then I think then it makes me feel much better, makes me feel less empty if I can use this to help someone else.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to wrap up a an incredible conversation. Sid, thank you so much for your honesty, for your insight, and for sharing even something so recent with us. I love following along, and I think if anything you take out of what you've done with Humanery, it would be the value in building community, but also sharing to a wider community. Because the amount of people that rallied around your post is incredible.
Oh, it was so
And
heartwarming, yeah.
and taking that into any venture, sharing, being open, being honest, being you, is going to ensure whatever you do next is a success, because people will warm to that form of honesty. So thank you for a really beautiful conversation.
Thank you for having me
I
on.
appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing whatever you do next. We'll be rooting for you.
Thank you so much. Let's stay in touch. This was a great conversation. You asked some beautiful questions.